I'm still on AOL. I'm still trying to figure out how to receive email. So I thank you guys for your patience.
That dial-up game is strong, Mark McGrath.
It's really weak. And the funniest thing is we're talking about the 90s and the dark side of the 90s. I'm still on AOL. You know what I'm saying? I am not one bit lying, and I'm even make it worse and darker. I still pay for it. My wife is like, what is wrong with you? I'm just an old persnickety old man stuck in his ways.
I'm living for it. Okay, well, this documentary was so fun. I wore my River Phoenix and Keanu shirt for you, my own.
Love it. Love it. Such a great movie. Gus Van Sant. Love that movie.
And first of all, I watched the movie. I really loved it. And then, of course, I just assumed you'd been there. And then I started Googling your history with the Viper Room. You could have your own documentary about Mark McGrath and his relationship with the Viper Room. How cool. You met your wife there. You proposed to your wife there. You are such a cute story. Can we talk about that? And do you feel comfortable with that at all?
Oh, absolutely. And it's incredible. And it's almost like it was meant to be to have me narrate. This series in general, I'm grateful to be narrating, but this particular episode, I don't think you could have someone more appropriate to narrate because I was there. Like if you look at some of the paparazzi video there, you could see my elbow in some of them. If you waited 10 seconds later, you'd see me walking down the street with my tank top thinking I was all cool. I mean, it was incredible. And I literally met my wife there in 1994, and I was sitting there, and my game used to be I used to play the wall, right? You'd have to come to me because I'm just so charismatic and wonderful, right? So I would sit there like pretending I was Luke Perry with like a furrowed brow with my drink, and I was there apparently a long time because a couple hours later, my now wife came up to me and says, "Are you going to hold that pole up all night long?" And I go, "I think I love you." That was the first thing I said to her, believe it or not. Long story shorter and longer, I ended up going back there years later and asked her to marry me at the Viper Room. We had it opened up during the day and the whole thing. I had a whole special thing. So I've got so many joyous memories of the Viper Room, which is ironic because the episode itself is very dark and explores the shadows of the Viper Room itself.
Right. Well, tell me if I'm wrong, because I was too busy chasing boy bands at that time.
Me too.
But is it comparable, would you say, to Studio 54? That magic that anybody wanted to be in that room and people that were there were really special?
Boy, that's a wonderful comparison. I never even thought of that analogy, and I think it could be spot on because the Viper Room, as you know, was bought by Johnny Depp for two reasons. For one, so he and his friends could have a place to hang out and not be bothered. And two, he had a musical artist he loved called Chucky Weiss, who used to play in that very venue. It was called the Central back in the day, and they were going to tear it down. So, number one, he didn't have a place to hang out anymore, and one of his good friends, Chucky Weiss, wasn't going to have a place to perform anymore. So it became this little clubhouse, and we didn't know at first if it was going to be private or public, and then we found out it was public. But if you really went there, it wasn't that public. There's only 150 people could really get into the place, and had a very strict door policy. So it quickly became the place to be. I mean, it kind of said like the legend of Studio 54 is the actual show was behind the velvet ropes, in front of the ropes, not inside it. But that's not the case in the Viper Room or Studio 54. So it definitely was that place to go hang, the place to be. You had to be there. I remember it was before Success with Sugar Ray and after. Before Success, I couldn't get in there. I remember the second I came back after we had a little bit of success, the first place I went to was the Viper Room, just to get walked in that velvet room because I belonged in there. It was like, it was like Mecca for me, just to show you where my fragile eggshell mind was at the time of what was important, No,
I think that's so interesting to hear because, especially in my case, I look at somebody like you who I feel like I've known of since I existed. So it's interesting to hear that there was a time where somebody didn't know who you were. I thought that it was really kind of compelling to hear Adam from the Counting Crows talk about struggling with fame and how this place was really such a sacred space for him. Well, it doesn't actually sound like you struggled with it. It sounds like you were pretty hyped, but did you at any point go like, this is kind of overwhelming. I need a cocoon?
You know, I understand some people's reaction in that nature that like, wow, I was never prepared for this. But my whole life, all I ever wanted was some success. I mean, to be in a band, you know, Adam Duritz is extremely talented, and he's very internal, and he's very cerebral, and he's a real artiste. You know, I'm more of like the clown jester. You know what I mean? And I was like ready for it. You know, I still have highlights in my hair. I mean, come on. I mean, you know, I always wanted the success. I never wanted it to go away, and I never knew how it was going to happen for me because I had a couple things going against me. I couldn't sing, and I couldn't write a song, and I couldn't play an instrument. So I really picked a profession where I had a lot of obstacles that's up against me. So when it finally came, I think I was like a little kid in a candy shop. I certainly ate too much candy for sure, but I definitely still love the candy. So it was different for me, and I understand why everybody has their own subjective response to fame. Especially, I mean, now it's a whole different world with social media. It's you know, I mean, the good news, everybody's gonna have has an opinion. That's also the bad news. But I remember walking into the Viper Room, and we hadn't had any success yet, and seeing Adam Duritz behind the bar and going, boy, this fame thing must be really tough. I just saw on MTV 3 hours ago. Now he's tending bar in the Viper Room. I didn't even know the story until I saw this particular episode. So you can really see why the Viper Room was made a safe space for celebrities. And Adam very eloquently explains the situation in the episode. And it really felt like that because when you were in there, though there was a capacity for 150 people, you felt like there was no more than 40 in there at any time. You know, there was never any trouble walking up to get a drink. You could sit anywhere, and it was perfectly built for celebrity for those that had it. You know, I didn't have it when I first got there.
You know, I definitely always think of River Phoenix whenever I pass the Viper Room. Did you ever have any encounters with him? Did you see him? Did you just admire him as an actor? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I definitely admired him as an actor. I never had a chance to meet him. You know, it's very strange because we moved up to LA in about January of '94. River's unfortunate passing was on Halloween of '93. Now, I started going to the Viper Room during that period, and you could feel a bit of a pallor over the whole. There was a bit of sadness and genuflect when you went to the Viper Room. You know, I mean, ironically, no one ever learns in Hollywood. People are still partying and doing their thing. But River's presence was so huge on Earth, and it was just as big in his passing. You know, it's always there, just like you. I always think about it and the place when we pass. I never met the man. I'm a huge fan of his work. A lot of fans still come from around the world to lay flowers there, write graffiti tributes to him. So I think, you know, all these years later, this actor that, you know, sort of like James Dean, that didn't have a huge body of work, but the body of work he's left us with is incredible, will always be remembered as this incredibly talented, beautiful character that was, you know, that it was almost like River had a secret none of us knew.
Yeah.
And we never found out what that secret was. And I think that's the thing that will always keep us wondering about River Phoenix and the Viper Room, for sure.
Right. You made a point a few minutes ago that I thought was really interesting about the transition from social media. Really interesting conversations about the paparazzi in this episode. I love Princess Diana, so of course I was very fond of that little clip.
Me too.
But oh, you'd love Princess Diana too?
Absolutely.
Are we best friends?
We might be best friends now. There's a connection happening here. I'm telling you.
But don't you feel like with social media, the paparazzi's control is not? Sorry, that's my dog saying hi. The paparazzi.
Was that a Maltese? Is that a Maltese?
Yes. Do you want to see him? Come here.
Yeah. How about I could tell by the bark? How about
He's
that?
a Maltese Yorkie mix. He needs a haircut.
How about that? I can tell by the bark. Oh, I love dogs. Oh, what a cute doggy.
But
we are best friends, by the way. That just confirmed me. So.
I feel like the paparazzi aren't as necessary, or I mean, celebrities and humans, we really have control over what people see now thanks to social media. And almost if you overshare on social media, it's almost just kind of like your picture's not worth as much anymore. So is that a good or a bad thing?
Well, it's an interesting dynamic you bring up because the Viper Room was kind of the first place where, you know, social media hadn't been thought of then yet. But technology was starting to come around, and certainly in cameras. You didn't need those giant cameras with the big lights anymore. You could, people walk around with little video cassette recorders, and they knew where the celebrities were going to be for the first time. They were always going to be at the Viper Room. So it was the first place where there's a lot of footage of a lot of different celebrities at a certain time coming out. So I thought that was kind of interesting coming out of the club. Let me qualify that. So I think there is so much footage because of that very fact that that's where they were. And that's an interesting when you look back on that, which kind of led to where social media is today. Because a lot of the things you see about the Viper Room on social media is from that very time of the video that the paparazzi got. It's when the paparazzi were starting to form too. Oh, there's actually a business here. Because when I first kind of got there was maybe one or two guys out in front of the camera, out in front of the club with the giant light, So it became this giant thing. None of us knew social media was ever coming around the corner. And obviously now it's here. And can you overshare? Absolutely. And I think it's kind of what I said earlier about social media. The best thing about it is everybody has an opinion now, and they can make an opinion. That's also the worst thing about it, because not everybody's opinion. I mean, I think this, if you have an opinion and you want to give it on social media, you should be responsible for that opinion. Instead of making these fake accounts that have 0 followers and you're just out there to slash and burn everybody. I mean, social media, unfortunately, brings out the worst in human nature, but I've seen it bring out the best too. So for me, hearing the positive negates any of the negative by far. But it is interesting that does it cheapen it a little bit? I don't know if it cheapens celebrity, but it certainly makes people celebrities that wouldn't have been celebrities 20 years ago.
Absolutely. Okay, I know I only have a few minutes left with you.
We have plenty of time. Don't worry.
Thank you, sir. This is the dark side of the 90s, but I'm loving the 90s. I'm loving revisiting some of these things. What do you miss about the 90s? What did you love about the 90s?
Well, I miss having hit songs. That was really fun, having the songs in the charts. I'm not going to lie. I'm not one of those artists that goes, I just want my music heard. Once I make it, it's out there. I don't care how it does. It was really fun having #1 songs. So personally, that was fun. It was what a great experience. And I knew it then. I really knew then how fortunate we were and are still. But I really, as time goes by and some distance goes by from the 90s, and it becomes this magical thing that I wasn't living in anymore, that I kind of outside of the bubble, I'm looking back like everybody else is, I really realized what a special time it was. I think what people realize and seem to have misconception about a lot of times is a lot of times you look back on decades with rose-tinted sunglasses, like, oh my God, the 90s were the best decade ever. Or the 80s, you couldn't beat. I mean, all of it had its problems. That's why we're doing the dark side of the 90s, to let everybody know and remember, under this thin layer of, say, Baywatch or the Beanie Babies, there was a lot of darkness and evil lurking in the shadows that hurt a lot of people, that led to death, that led to addiction. And I think it's important to look back on that, to have a responsible look at the decade so we don't repeat ourselves. Now, I know history always repeats itself because that's what history does. But I think taking a look at that and being hyper aware of it might slow some of it down, especially in terms of addiction, things like that. The 90s things were easy and it was just different. So I think it's good to look back and kind of realize there's dangers beneath those thin veneers of the things that attracted us to all of that, be it boy bands, Beanie Babies, or Baywatch. There was something always lurking in the corner.
I'm loving the Baywatch references. I totally forgot how committed I was to watching that show regular. Also, any Denzel Washington movie, it's just like, stop what you're doing. Richard Gere, Denzel Washington. It's in the 90s. It's a brilliant film.
I agree.
What else is going on the series? Because I've only seen the Viper Room episode. We have only a few minutes left, but can you tell me about what else I can see when I watch the series?
Absolutely. We mentioned the Viper Room, which you and I mentioned, which it's so well done. They've done the dark side of wrestling, dark side of football, so people are familiar with the series, and they really go deep. They get the real principal players of each episode. I don't know how they do it. Some that have never spoken on, say, Baywatch. They do a deep, dark dive of Baywatch, and you're going, Baywatch? That's just people running down the beach in bathing suits and David Hasselhoff with his hairy chest. There's so much more than that to Baywatch. And, talking about Jeremy Jackson, his struggles that he had. and some of the body image issues that some of the people, not just the ladies, had on that show was extremely revealing. So the Beanie Babies, an episode that I went in to go, okay, I'm going to narrate this. I don't have an extreme interest on the Beanie Babies, but we'll just work today and get it done. There is counterfeiting, jail, murder, everything involved in the Beanie Babies episode. It might be the darkest episode, which it blew my mind. I'm like, what is going on here? And then we have trash TV, which was the arrival of the Jerry Springer, the tabloid television that took over, and that also involves crime and murder. You know, it's crazy that, like, it's you know what? It's kind of such a great representation that the subjects they picked. This thinly veiled, on the veneer, on the surface, looks like some lightweight material. It was super dark, and I think that's what makes it so special. And of course, we have to have the grunge episode. But when I say that with, like, oh, of course, grunge, and you're going to have the picture of, the one picture of Chris Cornell that's very cheap on wire image that you use 40 times in the episode because you want to save money. Not in this one. They go on a deep dive with the co-owners of Sub Pop, who haven't really spoken on a lot of things. And there's video imagery from the episodes, from the times I've never seen before. I'm a 3-time Rock and Roll Jeopardy champion. And if you introduce me to new knowledge on grunge, you have done a very dark, deep dive. So the episodes just keep on delivering, and I think people are going to find that out with all 10 episodes of this series. You know, some of the smartest people I've ever had the pleasure of working with, and it all comes out in each episode.
Mark, you are such a joy. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me this morning. And I mean, I literally am walking away from this feeling 10 times better. So thank you for your positive energy and for being such a happy force.
I mean, talk about positive energy. Boy, you put a little light step in my day. I appreciate your energy. The set looks awesome. Your shirt is amazing. And thank you for the wonderful questions. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you, Sir Bigley says bye.
Bye.
Good day. Bye, Mark.
Bye. Thank you so much. Take care. Wonderful questions, by the way.